All right, let's talk about how much equity you should give a startup. And hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I want to talk to you about what percentage of equity you should anticipate giving a startup investor, particularly at what I would call your seed round, which is usually your first round of outside funding, outside of founders, family, friends, that kind of stuff. Someone that's outside of your core network. It's not a founder. It's not your mom and dad. It's not your best friend. It's an actual investor that you may or may not have known in the past. So we're talking about at the seed stage round, what percentage of equity you should plan to give a startup investor. Now, first, I want to tell you that coming up with a fair valuation for most startups that are at the seed round means that you're trying to value a company that is pre-revenue. It hasn't started making money yet. It hasn't started making sales. Okay, you've got expenses, but you don't have revenue. So you're pre-revenue. And it can be really, really challenging to put a valuation on a company that doesn't have any revenue. Now, there are about 4 or 5 different methods that you can use to value a business, to value a startup. But it's tough to do that. And so in many instances, what investors will do and the startup founders will do is they will use facilities like convertible notes, like the safe agreements, those types of things to push the valuation further down the road until there's more milestones and revenue that's coming in that can be used to put a fair value on the business. But if you're trying to figure out at the seed round how much equity to give an investor without being able to do some sort of valuation, it's really, really tough. So one of the things that I tell a lot of people that I work with is you can just use historical averages for seed rounds to get a sense of how much equity you're going to have to give up in your business. Now, reminder, if you don't know the basics, sometimes I like to cover those. Probably should have done that in the beginning, but equity being shares in your business. You're going to give up shares in your business to an investor. They're going to own a percentage of your business. Of course, if they own more than 51% of your business, then they theoretically, again, it depends on your legal agreement, your bylaws, operating agreement, all that good stuff, but they theoretically have control of the business. So you may not want to give up 51%. So how much equity for a seed stage round should you anticipate giving up? Historically, and as always, it depends by industry, but historically, you should anticipate giving up anywhere between 15 and 25% equity in your company during the seed stage round. What a lot of startup founders want to do, of course, is keep the amount of equity at a minimum. There's a lot of reasons they want to do that. They don't want to give up too much equity because they're giving up value in their company. They don't want an investor to have too much say so. All these various reasons. But at a seed stage round, it's important to be willing to give up equity in your business, because if you can't raise those funds, most likely, depending on your business model, you're not going to make it really far. So plan on somewhere between 15 and 20%, 25% of equity you're going to give up in your seed round. Now, the reason there's a range is even if you're pre-revenue, your startup can have accomplished some milestones along the way that will reduce the amount of equity that you should have to give an investor. So an example of those milestones would be things like if you filed for and received a patent on your idea, a design patent, a utility patent, not a provisional, meaning they're waiting to determine if they're going to issue it. If you've got an issued patent, that would be a milestone that would arguably give you the right to give up less equity in your business. If you have your first customers, maybe you have some purchase orders, some letters of intent are a common thing where a customer is saying, okay, once the solution comes, I will buy X amount from you, right? Those types of things. If you have ran some successful marketing campaigns and you've been able to acquire users on your software platform, maybe they're not paying you yet, but you've been able to acquire them. You've got proven track record of what it's going to cost for you to acquire those customers. That would be some more milestones. Maybe you've got 10,000 users that aren't paying you yet, but they're there, and you think you can convert some of those. That would definitely be a milestone. So there's all these things that you can accomplish in your business model that are not revenue based, but that decrease the amount of equity in most instances that you should have to give up to an investor. So count on giving up 15 to 25% in a seed round. I always encourage you to realize that it's better to own 1% of McDonald's globally than it is to own 100% of your hot dog stand. And so the analogy there that I'm trying to say is it's better to give up equity in your idea, especially if that funding, that capital is going to help your business grow and become much, much larger than if you were just to stay by yourself and have a hot dog stand. Nothing wrong with that. But that's a different discussion. You shouldn't be raising capital if you're not willing to give up equity in your business in the first place. So plan on 15 to 25% at the seed stage round. The less you can give up, the better, because that leaves equity for key employees. People get less diluted in subsequent rounds of funding if you can give up less. But I would encourage you to not lose a deal over a small percentage difference between what the investor is willing to give you and what you're willing to give up, because a bird in the hand is better than one in the bush. And sometimes when you miss that first investor, it's a lot like real estate. What they will tell you with real estate is that the first offer is usually the best one. And so that's usually, in my experience, going to be true with investors. The first offer you get is someone who's super interested. They have a right to ask for a little bit more equity because they're coming to you early. If you're 6 months into your fundraising, then you're probably going to have to give up even more equity because you really need it at that point. So I hope that information helps you. Until I talk to you next time, I hope you find your voice. Take care.